Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 6 Episode 4, So That's How It Is. As always, before you watch this video, please start off by watching the episode first before you watch this, to avoid spoilers and so you can support the show. Also, just to let you know that I'm heading back over to my brother's for a week starting this Thursday, and while this shouldn't get in the way of me working on and uploading videos, there may be a slight delay in terms of some releases here or there, and you can keep up to date on my goings on via my Twitter. Now then, on to the viewer comments from the previous review, and it's safe to say you guys had a lot to talk about after the massive lore bomb that we had, as well as all the actions of the four major players involved, more so regarding the God Brothers. For example, Musaki from the super cool lot over at Chaldea Gurus, hit them up by the way for all things fake Grand Order, said that he felt the gods were justified in their response to Salem's continued efforts to spite and challenge them. James Makepeace also chimed in about his love for how the God Brothers were presented and explored as characters, while Crow Branwen was one of a handful of people who feels that Ozpin did nothing wrong. Given the events of this episode, boy is that comment ironic. As ever, don't forget to leave your thoughts about this latest episode in the comments down below, and be sure to tune in next week to see if your comment gets featured. So last episode was definitely quite the rush. Truths were revealed, answers were shared, and surprises were found as we finally got a noteworthy look at how the show's major conflict first started and what lies ahead in the future. Now we're back in present day and the fallout begins. But was the episode able to respond after such a strong outing last time out, or was it too much to try and equal? Let's find out. We start with the immediate first response to everything that Jin revealed to our heroes, who are surrounding a crushed and crying Ozpin. Well, that's a sight and a half. But what do you expect after everything that just happened, on top of Yang venting her frustrations at him for thinking that it was acceptable to not tell the people willing to risk their lives for his cause that their biggest enemy is seemingly unstoppable? And to make matters worse, Ozpin drops the bomb that he doesn't even have a plan right now to defeat Salem, which, makes sense when you look back on things, considering he was likely locking away the relics in the first place to keep them out of Salem's hands until the time came when he did have a strategy. But that's not the kind of response that the heroes wanted to hear, so it should come as no surprise that Ozpin gets clocked hard in the face and he is sent flying. Though the real surprise is that the punch came from Crow, not Yang or any of the other girls. Ozpin's most trusted ally, sorry Glinda, just decked the guy hard, and he explains himself by saying that he trusted in Ozpin since he was the one who gave his life purpose. Crow's bad luck semblance has meant the man has had a very tragic and hard to deal with life that has resulted in many people not wanting him around. However, when Ozpin gave him the chance to do some good despite his curse, he felt like he could finally have a place in the world, so he trusted in Ozpin's judgment, giving his life to aid him. Yet now, after all the lies, all the mistrust, and with all his efforts seemingly looking like it's leading towards a doomed end no matter what he did, he bemoans ever trusting in Ozpin to begin with, calling it the worst luck he's ever had. And when you can imagine all the unfortunate things that Crow's had to deal with his past as a bandit, the loss of Summer, the splintering of his team, and his conflicts with Raven, that's quite the insult thrown in Ozpin's face. It's a very shocking response from, again, Ozpin's most trusted and loyal ally, and I've seen a lot of fans call it harsh or even calling it out of character for Crow. But I would argue against that. In fact, I think it's a very understandable response, and I could hardly argue with Crow feeling like he has to lash out in some way, be it physical or otherwise. Crow's had to cope with a majorly shitty life, And when the one person that gave you a chance to turn that around has led you down a path that looks to be leading to nothing but more suffering and pain, I think it's fair to be angry at that person for dragging you into it in the first place. Even in the most darkest of struggles, that hope that Ozpin gave him must have kept pushing Crow along to see another day. So when that faith can be called into question, even the most dependable of teammates will look at the leader and ask, was it all worth it? It doesn't exactly excuse him from punching the body that is still that of a kid's, and that same kid can still feel that pain, as we'll later see. But I do stand by my comments that it was a justified reaction, and a hell of a way to showcase the weight of Ozpin's shady actions, resulting in some major cracks within the group. And clearly, Crow's words hurt Ozpin far more than that punch did. The guy tears up some more as he tries to argue against him that he is doing some good, but in the end, even he begins to admit that maybe he was wrong in putting Crow through all this mess, before he switches control back to Oscar. Though much to Yang's cursed-filled demands for the ex-headmaster to come back and face his accusations, this isn't a regular soul switch. He's actually willingly locked himself deeper inside Oscar's mind, shutting himself off from the world and from everyone else, likely to stew over what's just transpired and the weight of his actions up to this point. This may seem like he's just running away from being confronted for his actions, but this too felt justified to me. Yes, he should be questioned and challenged for his risky actions, for lying constantly, and for hiding such vital information from those who's willing to possibly die fighting alongside him. But think about this from his perspective. The guy just got forced to relive all of his past mistakes that led to a lot of conflict and suffering in the world, as well as the deaths of his children and the loss of his once dear love. These failures clearly are still regrets that he has, and he's still yet to move on from them because of the curse and the mission that he's been tasked with. And all of this came from the last time that he kept the truth from those he cared about and then later told the truth too. Obviously, his trust levels took a heavy knock, and he was scared of it repeating again. Now it has, and he's starting to break. Again, the man who for many years was this confident, composed, wise leader is now knee-deep in the snow after getting punched out by his teammate, and he's breaking down in tears, and those who are now berating him won't give him a chance to defend himself. So of course this emotionally fragile man would decide that he needs to be left alone, though without a doubt he will need to face the music. Just not right now, when tempers are high and no one is willing to talk about this with a calmer head. Oscar is also losing it, wishing all this madness being Ozpin's soul partner would stop. Crow's not looking too good either now that he's sulking himself into a state, and the girls are either seething with anger or unsure of what to do next. Thankfully, Maria is here to try and calm things down a little, so they can at least figure out their next move, and not draw in any grim with their negativity. While she too is trying to come to terms with all that she's been thrusted into discovering, and she understands the group's emotions, there's no sense in everyone arguing amongst themselves when the first order of business should be to get into somewhere safe and warm out of the cold. And with RWBY supporting the idea, everyone grabs what they can from the train crash for the long walk for shelter. RWBY does try to lift Oscar's spirits meanwhile, after he heartbreakingly thinks that he's just going to become another notch in one of Ozpin's many lives, and the little red wants the farm boy to keep his head up and remember that he's still his own person, though that positive notion gets shot down hard by Crow telling her not to lie to him. Ouch, man. I get you're in a really sour state right now, and again, it is justified, and you feel like this is RWBY giving the kid false hope just like Ozpin gave some to you, but that's still not fair to poor Oscar. It seems like RWBY's the only person right now who's actually trying to give a damn about the kid, regardless of the Ozpin situation. We then cut to Salem's Domain, and the arrival of Hazel, Emerald and Mercury via Mistralian airship. I guess that explains how Salem's Lot can arrive here by normal means, though I do wonder who's flying the ship if these guys were ready at the exit. Oh my god. Did they bring back Pilot Boy and make him a bad guy? Okay, so odd little detail aside, these three aren't looking all that chipper themselves after failing hard in Haven. Emerald especially looking the most heartbroken with the apparent death of Cinder. And their mood doesn't improve with their welcome wagon. The returning Freak of the Week, Tyrion, complete with his new stinger. It doesn't look all that special from one simple glance, and it just looks like a simple metal replacement. But it would not shock me if there's a trick or two to this new addition. Regardless, he's as delightfully unsettling as ever, and he rubs salt in the open wound about Cinder's death to push at Emerald's buttons, freaking her out with his sheer lack of care to her threat while giving his own, to really hammer it home that Cinder's no longer around, though Mercury does cut in to back up his partner. That's actually pretty cool to see. Sure, these two like to butt heads with each other, and they aren't exactly what you would call bosom buddies, but they do have great chemistry together both on and off the battlefield, and seeing Mercury defend Emerald when she needed it was a welcome sight, considering they've really only got each other left. Tyrion, however, continues to be a thorn in their side, making it clear that they do have reason to feel afraid after failing Salem. Also, damn, that is one super uncomfortable grin. In fact, hey, comment section, pick which freaky face is your favorite of the volume so far. Are you on hashtag Team Tyrion or hashtag Team Nora? Cast your pick in the comments down below and support your scary expression. One trademark Tyrion laugh later, and we're now in Salem's throne room, where the Wicked Witch demands the trio to explain their failure, and more importantly, who's to blame for it. Hazel initially blames the Faunus militia, and then tries to take the full responsibility by himself. But it's clear from Salem quickly launching the table aside, clocking out Tyrion by the way, and angrily reaching out for him, that she sees only one true person to blame, and it's not the big guy, who she then pins down to the ground with a sudden swarm of grim arms that look eerily similar to the same claws that we saw in the opening, reaching out for Crow and later Ruby. Definitely worth keeping an eye out for any further appearances of these hands, especially if they can keep a big guy like Hazel down. Salem then turns her attention to Emerald, who looks so scared you could probably breathe on her and she will crumble and scream out in terror. And it's this fear of what Salem might do to her that leads to her begrudgingly admitting Cinder is to blame, which is the truth since she was the one who changed the initial plan for Haven and got beat by Raven. But still, you can definitely tell that it pained Emerald to oust Cinder just to protect herself. Cinder was her saving grace, the only one who gave her a second chance for a better life, and she obviously felt strongly for her. Now she's had to deal with losing her and then throwing her name into the dirt just to spare herself any harm. If there's any doubt about whether or not she's in over her head with having gotten to work under Salem's orders, this was definitely the deal breaker. And it'll be quite interesting to see how she handles being under Salem's command without Cinder around. However, Salem does inform Emerald and the others that Cinder is still alive, possibly finding this out from her control over the Grim, what with Cinder's Grim arm and all. And she's being left alone without Salem's aid as punishment for her failures, and only after she's made up for where she's gone wrong will Salem possibly welcome her back. I say possibly because, sure, even with Salem giving some leeway to her force's stumbles in the past, I don't hold up much hope that Salem would easily welcome Cinder back completely, even if she does prove herself worthy of a return. And Salem does remind those still among her numbers that she will not allow any further instances of someone's personal goals leading to more failures. Their success can only come from her success, and any personal vendettas that will cause any further complications will not end pretty for those involved. Now that thread has been shared, the group then begins to redirect focus towards their next relic target, the sword that is the relic of destruction found underneath Shade Academy in Vacuo. But before Salem can delve any further, Hazel passes on his new information about the heroes heading to Atlas, a prospect that entices Tyrion, and that they're being led by Ozpin. This comes as a shock to the others, as they did not expect him to be reborn so soon, and him headed north is not good news, as he's the only one that they feel can calm down the unsettled General Ironwood before he potentially sparks up another Great War. As for Salem's response, well, she's pretty pissed off, and after demanding everyone to leave, she screams out loud and unleashes her dark anger in a blast that shatters the windows around her, closing off this scene in style. Well, that was a pretty tense moment, huh? Very unsettling, but it was probably the strongest segment of the episode. It did such a solid job of establishing the next step for the villains. We caught up on their current mindset after their first major defeat, and we got to see Salem for the first time after discovering more about her past and the origins of her conflict with Ozpin. And she was quite the intimidating entity, perhaps more so than any appearance she's had since her debut. The added clarity of who she once was makes for a stable contrast to the kind of cruel, corruptive, and dangerous woman she is now, and I'm glad the show didn't just rest on her past appearances in showing this side of her, but instead amped it up to make sure we remember she is a terror that has all these numbers wrapped around her finger, and she's not willing to take any defeat lightly. She was imposing and unhinged, but still cunning and twisted enough to show even just her words have weight over her minions. Plus points as well for addressing Cinder still being alive, but having it fit into Salem's character that she would let her suffer alone while still making the most of her usefulness. And the scene with her worming her way into Emerald's head, establishing a stronger command over her, was extremely well done to make me feel really sorry for Emerald. Could this lead to the prospect of that much talked about redemption arc for Emerald if she realizes just how in over her head she is right now? Perhaps. It all depends on how she reacts now without Cinder to lead her and with Salem taking a bigger interest in her. It might be she's in too deep now to ever get out alive, much less making a face turn at all. But it is a curious little detail to keep track of. I do, however, like how Hazel seems to be filling in for the lack of Cinder in her life by watching out for her alongside Mercury. There's a vibe from his small gestures and guidance that he is actually concerned for her, which could be more of his still considerate heart beating strong, just like when he first aided Oscar in the past, or maybe there's a part of him that is protective of Emerald because of the hole in his heart from losing his sister Gretchen. A sort of protective brother mentality that is peeking through alongside wanting to keep the young girl steady. Back with the heroes trudging through the snow, morale is still at an all-time low with the blistering cold and the sense that they might have to walk all the way to Argus, not exactly helping their mood at all. But some good fortune does come their way when RWBY catches a sound that leads them to a deserted farm called Brunswick Farms. At first I thought Brunswick was just going to be a simple color reference with it being a shade of green, but some eagle-eyed folks in the fandom have also caught another, more sinister reference, as the name could be referring to the city in Germany also known as Braunschweig, which, one, is a name meaning a place where merchants rest, making it a truly fitting place for our heroes to rest up, but two, in some German folklore, it's the setting for the appearance of a headless horseman called the Wild Huntsman that blows a horn to warn hunters not to ride out the next day, lest they face an accident. If I were to hazard a guess, I think we could expect to see a headless horseman or some kind of Dullahan Grim to appear in the future, likely the cause of this farm being abandoned. And with this noticeable tunnel leading deep underground, It could very well also tie in with this shot of RWBY from the opening and whatever trials she'll soon be facing. Either way, this place might not be as safe as it may look, but it's the best that the group can ask for right now to get out of the cold and rest their weary bodies and minds. And so they head on in, with everyone feeling far from hopeful for the future as the episode comes to a close. So, I think now's a good time to address some of the complaints that I've seen for this episode regarding its short runtime and the contents within. Obviously, going from the series' longest episode yet to a 30-minute long episode is quite the switch, and just from the first watch, it may feel like this entry didn't really offer too much. But then I have to ask, what were you expecting? Here's the thing, I knew the moment I found out about the runtime that this wasn't gonna be a meaty episode. After all, we just came off a blockbuster episode, and the volume so far has had packed episode after packed episode, with a lot of highly crafted and intense scenes that no doubt asked a lot of the writers and the animators. So it shouldn't come as a surprise then that an episode would soon come along that is shorter and isn't as grandstand as those previous. But here's the thing, I would not say this episode is bad or that it was lacking. In fact, I think it did everything that it set out to do and did it quite well. Of course, I would like every episode to be such and such minutes long with landmark moments all the time, but that's also asking far too much from the RWBY. And you need tamer, less bombastic episodes like this to set the atmosphere to come. We've had a thrilling action scene, and then some impactful lore and history exploration. Now it's time for the focus to be on the characters' emotions and their relationships, and that requires things to be slowed down. The villain scene was still spot on what I hoped for, a nail-biting and edgy scene that shows the impact of their first defeat and the aftershocks of Ozpin's return, all building a tight foundation for what actions they work on next, and recapturing some of that lost threat and fear factor in Salem, who was the linchpin to this scene's positives with her commanding aura and frustrations. And even with the trimmed down runtime, we still had an explosive start with the hero's response to all the truths and revelations. And I must stress, this is the start of the fallout. The straining of the group's hope and trust is going to be a key theme for the next couple of episodes, as we see the cracks in the team's unity start to spread, and we explore how they go about fixing it in time for their next battle. We didn't need this episode to be stuffed top to bottom with their backlash at Ozpin or Ozpin coming to terms with his faults. That will all be explored over a longer period of time in the volume, and we'll be much better off letting those emotions simmer at a steady pace. Ozpin's lament and fall from grace continues to still be an emotionally investing part of the story for me. Seeing him at his weakness and his flaws being pushed into focus more and more is something that I'm truly enjoying, as it's humanizing him and making him more of a character and less of a plot point figure. Crow's also got a new side of himself on view with his personal breakdown that I feel is something fresh for the character. I'm very much looking forward to seeing where it leads. Yang's on fire once more as the team's major outcrier, and RWBY was again shown in a strong light as a leader, as she balances trying to address the issues with Ozpin, while so far really being the only one who's considerate for Oscar, whose own torment will be fun to dive deeper into in the coming episodes, as it looks to be returning to some of that disagreement with his new role that was first explored back in Volume 4. Even without any rose-guarding ship hinting to be found, I'm glad that RWBY's kindness and support for Oscar was so quickly switched on the moment that Oscar was back in control. And like I said in the past, I can see her being a key role in trying to aid his recovery and all of those feeling broken, lost, or aggravated, just like a leader should. Maria though has already cemented herself as a very welcome addition to the group, as she also kept a level head where others have lost theirs. Her back and forth with Yang was especially entertaining and is worth praising. Great job there, already making her feel like a key part of the team. And alongside RWBY, I can imagine both these two will be major players in the rebuilding process to come. Perhaps even with some silver eyes elements touched on too, if the theories about the old lady's eyes ring true. And more praise is deservedly given to the visual and audio teams for the wonderful use of camera angles for the added weight of a scene's tone, top drawer facial expressions for that added emotional punch, and the perfect timing on the background pieces, all adding to the scene's positives. Acting wise, it was also high quality, par for the course, with Jen Taylor continuing the fine form that she had from the last episode, alongside some very lovely acting done from the likes of Katie, Barbara, Aaron, Vic, and Josh. But the one that I feel most deserving of praise, and of my voice acting gold star for the episode, is Maria's voice actress, Melissa Sternenberg, for her superb performance in Maria's first true exploration of her character's strength and charm. And so, despite the shorter runtime, to say that I came out of this episode feeling bored, disappointed, or anything of that sort would be extremely inaccurate, as I relished our first steps in what should be a pivotal moment of reflection and recovery for our heroes. The emotions were realistic, the tension strong, and the pace was steady, and the setup for the future is well presented. Everything a good bridging episode should do. So I have to say, it succeeded at what it no doubt was set out to do. Not a groundbreaking episode of course, but not a god-awful one either. Just an effectively good one. Hopefully it's not too long before we do hit some more bigger highs of the volume, but even with the slower, more tempered entry in the volume, I am pleased with what I got, and that's all I could hope for. Anything more would just be a bonus. But those are just my thoughts. How do you feel about this episode? Was it enough to satisfy you for now? What's your take on the backlash at Ozpin? And what do you expect Salem and her faction to do next? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, please hit the subscribe and bell buttons to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on all things RWBY, updates on future content, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.